Hello and welcome back to the Simplifiers podcast, where we take topics in business and in life and simplify them. Like that's it. That's all we do here. And it makes it really simple when we're looking for a podcast to listen to. Now, here's the thing though. Sometimes making decisions in your work and in your life is anything but simple. So I thought, well, what a perfect topic to simplify today. And I think I have the right person for it. My special guest today is Tiffany Han. Now, she's the host of Raise Your Hand, Say Yes podcast, and she's a life coach who teaches smart, driven women how to become the most remarkable versions of themselves and learn to raise their hands and say yes to all the things they want to do, be, and say without compromising their standards or their sanity for that matter. Featured in Inc.com, Salon.com, and Psychology Today, she's delivered keynotes all over the world. With a penchant for keeping it real, her focus is really on how women can stop overperforming for the sake of the life that somebody else dictates for them. Oh my God, drop the mic right there. And start saying yes to themselves. So I'd like to welcome to the Simplifiers podcast today, Tiffany Han. Hey, Tiffany.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
So, Tiffany, here's the real deal, okay? You know this, I know this, and I know a lot of our listeners are feeling this. When you are out there in the world trying to build a business, trying to do the thing, and you're like, oh my God, I could just go 80 billion directions in my life. Like, how does one make a decision? I mean, it's just too much sometimes, right?
Right. Yes. And, in the entrepreneurial space, we're all told to work for ourselves so that we can have ultimate freedom. Yay. And that is amazing. And also with that ultimate freedom can come often the paralysis of being able to go any different direction.
That's right.
So one of the things that I like to think about and teach about is the Fibonacci Sequence, which is something that happens in nature. If you've ever watched those videos of, a flower unspiraling, and you see it in that one type of cauliflower, the Romanesco, is that what it's called?
Yes,
and
where it spirals.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in the Fibonacci sequence, it's a mathematical law, and I really like to look at when I'm answering these things too that tend to be a little bit more emotionally driven. I like to look to science and nature. For some support in that. But in the Fibonacci sequence, the whole thing unfolds by just taking the very teeny tiniest next step. And then the next step builds off of that. And eventually you get this exponential growth and change, but you can't go from step 1 to step 12. If you do that, you're going to miss all of the developing that happens within those tiny steps. So I believe that our only job is to have faith that we will be able to figure things out as we go, which to me helps me keep my focus really just right down at my feet on like, what's the very next baby step to take care of. And the problem comes in with especially women like us who are smart and ambitious and we want to do everything. And that's how we have gotten reinforcement throughout our entire lives is by taking on it all and getting it all done. We don't think it's enough. Yeah. So we don't let it be enough, but that's the only way that you're going to get to that place of impact that you really want to be.
So let's back up a little bit because I think you're absolutely dead on. I mean, we as women, we want to do all the things and we want to do all the things right now. And I talk a lot about doing the thing, but doing all the right things, like just laser focusing in on that. So we're going to table that for just a hot second. I want to know about you. So talk to me about your backstory. Like, how did you become a podcaster and a life coach? What led you all the 80 billion little steps to where you are now?
For me, we could go the long winding path down, but I'll try to narrow it. I always wanted to do something that was of service, that felt helpful to the world. And I looked into my background was in psychology. That's what I studied in school. And then I worked in nonprofits and I thought about social work and I thought about doing more academic psychology stuff. And I thought about public policy and I kept finding myself on these paths and being like, this isn't exactly right. And what it was that I couldn't see myself 10 years later being happy there. So I'm really glad that I had the foresight to think that way so that I didn't get 10 years down the road and be like, I don't like this, but I kind of feel like I have to stay because I think that that's really common too. So I discovered life coaching back in, I think, 2009. And I was like, what is this amazing thing that's not therapy, but it's helpful and it's of service? So I got my life coach training, my certification in 2011. And then I actually started my podcast in 2014, shortly after I had my twin daughters, because I was having all of these great conversations during my maternity leave with my smart, creative, successful friends that were coming over to sit on my couch and hold a baby for hours on end. And I kept saying, I want to record these conversations for my clients. And so I considered doing a video series for my blog because at the time I was blogging because it was 2014. But because I had these new babies, I decided to do a podcast because that way I wouldn't have to get dressed.
Right. Brilliant.
That was the entire decision. And then my friend Elise had started a podcast and I was like, oh, I went on her podcast and I said, that would be really fun. So I'm really glad that I started a podcast in 2014 because it was before Serial happened. So it was like before podcasting was a thing that everybody knew about.
Yeah. And I think that that's what's the beauty of podcasts. I mean, that's why we all listen to them. That's why I have one now, is that you get so much from learning when people pull back the curtain and actually tell you, like, this is not sugar coated. This is not Instagram filtered. This is real life. And it is messy sometimes, and that's where the true learning comes from. And not to toot your own horn, but I will toot your horn for you. I mean, your podcast has been, making huge strides, 1.2 million downloads the last I'd heard. So it's incredible.
Thank you.
You're onto something. Keep doing it.
I love it. I love it. It's a great medium and I've got 228 episodes done and I feel like I'm just starting to scratch the surface. So it's been really fun.
So I want to talk about kind of going into the concept of simplifying decision making, specifically in your work life, but also let's just talk about life. Back in November of 2018, you made a conscious decision to take a step back from social media. What drove you to make that decision?
I was just spending all of my time on social media. And if I wasn't on it, I was thinking about it, or talking about it or strategizing about it. So in January 2017, I quit drinking. And I've been very open. I talk a lot about my path to sobriety and recovery and all of that. And when I quit drinking, one of the reasons I tell my story about that so often is that I didn't hit rock bottom. My life wasn't in shambles. I didn't get arrested. I didn't wake up in a ditch, right? None of those kind of worst case scenario stories happened to me, but I recognized that I didn't have a healthy relationship with alcohol. And I recognized that I was on a path that I didn't want to get to the end of, right? Like this is not going to end well if I keep going with the way that I'm going. So I decided to do what people in the recovery world call an early exit. I sort of got off that train early. So since then, I have become, doing my own work in sobriety and recovery, I've become very aware of my own tendencies to habitually go back to things, maybe not in a deliberate way, and where I numb. So before I used to numb with a glass of wine, and it's very, very, I think a lot of us now are numbing with social media or food or shopping or gossip or Netflix or like fill in the blanks, right? We've all got whatever our thing is that helps us check out a little bit. And so there was, back in October, I had looked at, on the iPhone, there's a thing where you can look at the battery and it'll tell you how much time you're spending on each app. And I had looked at that and it said that I had spent 11 hours in a week on Instagram.
Yeah, on one
On one
platform.
platform.
One
Yes.
platform. Yeah.
And I felt
on just your phone, mind you, not even your
Exactly.
computer as well. Like,
Exactly. And I
yeah.
felt this like immediate sense of shame. And then I was like, well, I have to write about this because that's sort of my way is whenever I feel ashamed of something, I just say it out loud. And that helps. So I wrote a newsletter about it and somebody replied to my newsletter and she said, it was very kind. And she said, oh, I love your Instagram. And I would have thought you spent more time than that because you do such a good job. And I replied and said, no, that's not the time spent making the post or writing captions because I do all of that off the app. That's just time spent on the action with the app open on my phone. And she responded and said, do you ever feel like you're just spending like a large chunk of your life, 1/4 at least of your work day, of your work week, just working for free for Mark Zuckerberg? And I was like, yeah. And also, oh my God. Right. And I think that it took phrasing it like that to be like, what am I doing? And so I know myself and there are things that I can moderate and there are things in my life that I can't. And I just was like, I need the headspace and I want to do this. And another thing that I like to do a lot is a lot of people are like, oh, well, I could never, right? I could never quit drinking. I could never get off social media. I could never quit my day job. I could never ask for what I need in the home or in the bedroom or in the boardroom or whatever, right? It's like, and so sometimes I feel like my job is to actually do the thing and then be like, you guys, it's fine. I survived. It's totally fine. And so, I was like, all right, I'm going to do this. And what I told myself was there was definitely some fear that what if my business doesn't exist at the end of this month, right? What if it's all built on Instagram? And I said, well, if that's true, then it's not built on anything anyway. Because
it's not sustainable.
Yeah, because Instagram could go away tomorrow and we'd all be screwed. So like, let me at least find out if there are holes that I need to patch.
Yeah. It's funny that you should say that because one of my teammates, Leiden, who is brilliant on the Simplifiers team, actually posed that same question in one of our quarterly retreats. And he said, do you think businesses need social media to survive? And my gut initial reaction was like, well, of course. Like, how could you run a business without social media was my instant reaction. And, it's so not true. I mean, think of the plumbers in the world that are making 70, 80, 90K a year happily, not anywhere on social media and fully booked, know? So,
and I would also challenge anyone. I mean, what I did during my break is I really tried to look at how can I publish to social media in a way that is healthy for me? I think the key, who I think has it figured out is Beyonce, because she doesn't follow anyone. She follows 0 people. And in a way, I like following the people that I follow. They bring me great joy. They're my friends, all of that. But you get sucked into the scroll. And I mean, I know that Beyonce also has like secret Snapchat. So maybe the key is to have like a secret account. I don't know. But every now and then I'm like, I think I want to do the Beyonce way and just follow 0 people. But that also seems like kind of a jerk move.
Well, I mean, that's it. So the bottom line of social media is to keep your eyeballs on there for as long as possible. So you get the dopamine hit of, what I call the mindless death scroll, where you just kind of scrolling, and you're like, ooh, a video, like scroll, ooh, a cat video, and it's just mindless. And there goes 30 minutes of your life gone. Whereas you think you're being busy, I'm using air quotes here, but you're not.
And you think you're working. And that's the other thing, right? So if you want to scroll when you're in the bathtub or like waiting for the laundry to dry, whatever, but don't call it work. And I think that's where in the entrepreneurial landscape, so many of us have gotten stuck is that we're like, oh, no, I'm working. But really 2 hours later, we finally follow through on the thing we opened the app to do.
That's right. Yeah. So what do you think were a few surprises or lessons learned from that experience? You took a whole month. You said no Instagram. Did you do anything on Facebook, Twitter, any of the other places?
I didn't open. So my goal was to not open the apps at all for the entire month. I used Planoly to publish my posts. So that's an app that will publish to Instagram for you if you have a business account.
Yep.
So I did use that. So I still published posts. I didn't go on stories at all. And stories is something for me where I really like stories, and it just is not healthy for me. So I'm still trying to navigate my way through that. A couple of things that were surprising. I got so much done, like a shocking amount. So many of the things that I moved from my to-do list month after month after month, I just got them done, which was amazing. It also made me recognize how much stuff I carried around in my day-to-day life from engaging on, right? Because you're consuming it. So if you think about consuming food, you consume that food and then it stays with you and your body processes it or holds on to it or whatever. But like, that's what I didn't even know was happening to me with the Instagram. So that helped. I also found, shockingly, this was really surprising. When I went back on in December, my engagement ended up dropping. And
really?
My theory on that is that because in November, I was actually connected with my life. So I was having better ideas. I was feeling better. I had more energy. I had more time. I had emotional headspace, more attention to give to that deeper work. The things I think I was posting were more connectable with people. And then when I went back on, it was like, oh, just do the day's Instagram post, whatever. And for my people, they don't care about that, right? They don't want me to just put out content just to put out content. So I like the whole fear of, oh my God, my engagement's going to tank. The opposite was like, when I came back, my engagement was like, meh. So that was really exciting to know that like, oh, I can take these breaks and set these limits for myself and still be okay.
And replenish yourself. And then, I think what I'm hearing you say there is that when you come back, I mean, even if you don't take a break, the stuff you're putting out, as long as it's not noise, like it truly is connecting, bringing value, telling a story that your audience actually wants to, it's not just like, oh, this is what I ate today. Isn't that great? Thumbs up, give me a like,
Yeah. Yeah. And especially for the work that I do, it's about digging deeper,
Yes.
And so if I'm like, look at my cute sweater, that's not enough. Right. And yeah.
Yeah. And, I think I stumbled upon your Instagram, I don't even know, probably 2 years ago at this point now. And you know what I love about your Instagram feed? The posts that I think are the very best that you post, if I can be so bold to say, are the moments where you are speaking just to me. And it's a Post-it note with your finger and you're just giving me one little like whisper. And that's it. Like those are so beautiful and so simple. And it doesn't take some filtered beautiful photo of you in a branded photo shoot. It's just, hey, toots, have you thought about this? And those are the ones that I think are the most powerful.
Yeah. And I've tried the branded photo shoot, stock photo. Like I've tried that so many times because everyone says that's what you should do. And you should plan it out for a month and da. And every time I do it, I'm like, it feels awful to me. People hate it. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to do it the easy way, the simple way. Yeah.
And I should clarify, you should have, in my opinion, you should have good photos of yourself for your website. And, if you're a public speaker, all the things, yes. But I think also the evolution, 2018 was a big year for social media, in my opinion. And the evolution of this last year and with all the things that happened with Facebook and Cambridge Analytica, people are starting to actually peel the curtain back and go, hang on, wait, this is not reality. These are public, beautiful filtered, perfect photos. This is not the reality of where you were an hour ago. An hour ago, your child was throwing up.
Yeah, well, and I think that people, one of my most popular posts that I put on Instagram, and I'll give you the link if you want to include it in the show notes, was I had just gotten my new headshots back that showed me, with hair and makeup sitting at my beautiful, adorably styled desk. And I did like a slideshow showing this is a photo here's what I'm supposed to say is, look, I got my photos. But the reality is like swipe through, this is what my desk looks like today. Right. And
Yes.
this hair and makeup took 2.5 hours. And it took me 4 hours before that to clean my desk, and I think too, for me, I cannot separate out my own personal responsibility in the Instagram world. And the more content that I produce there, the more people are there. So I have to make sure that if I'm asking someone to be on this app and to engage with me there, that what they're getting is quality and not just a hit where I can look and be like, oh, people like me. There are other places in my life I can get that reassurance.
Right, exactly. So, okay, you took a break. You felt good. Your business didn't crumble. Everything is fine. You are sitting in front of me right now, so you've had 100% survival rate. Yeah? Good times. Now, let's talk about decision making. So you feel so strongly about saying yes that you have named your podcast about this. So let's talk about this because aren't there areas where you should say no in life?
Yes. And I've done a lot of episodes about saying no too. Raise your hand, say yes, and then say no like a lot. Right. And
yes.
The whole thing about raise your hand, say yes. I mean, there are two modes to it. One is, especially as women, we often only want to say yes if we're absolutely certain that we can get things done. And like I said before, our biggest job is to have faith in our ability to figure things out, not to know every step of the way before we get it, before we say that yes. So I think a lot about Hermione Granger in Harry Potter, right? She's always raising her hand. She's always like, I know the answer. And for a lot of us, I know that the biggest turning points in our lives have come when we've said yes to something. And then in the very next breath, been like, oh my God, what have I done? Oh my God, what did I say I would do? But we figure it out, we get through it. And then that's when we develop resilience. The other thing though, is I only want y'all to say yes to the things that really make you come alive, the things that feel really thrilling and that feel really resonant. Everything else is a no. Yes. And for my people and in my classes I teach, we spend so much time practicing saying no. And we think like somebody just recently wrote me and she said, well, I said no, but there's still people coming at me, right? Wanting me to do things. And I'm like, yeah, because you've spent your entire life saying yes and living somebody else's definition of success. And I am like a no machine. I say no all the time, like every day. And it feels hard, but also at the end of the day, I can sleep at night, which, I mean, we can talk about rest and how we're taking care of our actual bodies for making decision making easier. But I'm able to sleep at night because I'm not overloaded and I'm able to prioritize the things that I say yes to, the things that I want to make most important. And everything else, it doesn't have to completely go away, but it's just not right for right now.
Right. And that's the secret, I think, is that every little whisper and idea that pops in your head from the shower does not have to be actualized by you right now or even ever, Because I think sometimes we as business owners, especially, we just we're ideas machines. We're just like, well, what if we did this? What if we did that? What if the possibilities are boundless. And so I want to do all the things right now, right this second, yesterday, and that's where we wear out. So do you have a framework that you use personally that helps you get to the yes or the no? Like what's at the core of that?
I mean, I think that for me, it comes down to being really aware of my core values, knowing what matters the most. And I have had to have a lot of really hard talks with myself just about literally how many hours there are in the day. So my way of going through things is I rarely ever answer right away. So when I think something is a yes, I will just pause. When I think it's a no, I will pause. Although I try to say no soon, Because there's nothing worse than not saying no, but you want to say no, but then the person follows up with you because you haven't responded and then you feel bad. So you say
And then there's the
yes because like,
awkwardness.
really, we're
Yes.
just kind of a jerk about it. So I do a lot of gut checks. And the other thing that I think is so useful is to know where you want to go. Because if you know where you want to go, then when opportunities come up, and I'll say opportunities like in air quotes too, because a lot of times opportunities are just you doing work for somebody else.
Yep.
But when opportunities come up, I can say, is this in alignment with where I want to be 5 years from now? The other thing I do if somebody's feeling stuck is I call it the Google test, which is if I say yes to being on a podcast, this podcast, let's say, and somebody were to Google me and the Simplifiers podcast was the first thing that came up, am I okay with that?
Yeah.
Right? Will I feel proud of that? Is that something that I feel well represented, that I'm like, yeah, that's great. If that's the first thing that people are going to use to define me and my work, awesome. But if you're like, no, I don't think. I once had somebody reach out to me from a very kind of conservative religious magazine, and they wanted to publish something I had written in their magazine, which was they were very sweet, very kind. It was very loving. And I was like, oh, what a beautiful thing to do with something I wrote. But I was like, if that's the first thing that were to come up, that is not in alignment with my brand.
And where you're headed.
And where I'm headed, not that there's
Yep.
anything wrong with them, but it made it a very clear, no, that's not really it's not a match. It's a mismatch. So I think that's a really good thing. If you're just not sure, like what's the Google test say?
And I think that's really valuable. And I love how simple that is in my mind's eye. And also kind of going back to what you said earlier, I think what's interesting, what you said in that last bit was knowing where you want to be 5 years from now, but then focusing on your next step. It's not keeping your eyes always on the vision ahead, but really saying, okay, this is where I want to go. I have no idea how to get there, but I'm just going to take the next step,
Right.
And that's, I think, the truth there in all of it.
Yeah. And think about if you plant a seed and our job was to control every single part of the process. And I'm planting a seed and I'm like, okay, this is going to be a tree, an apple tree. My brain would immediately go to, okay, well, what do I want the apples to look like? And how do I want them to taste? And are they big? Are they little? Are they firm? Are they not? What about the leaves? What about this? What about this? But if I'm jumping from seed in the ground to apple in the hand, there's so much that's getting missed, right? And there's so much
totally.
that yes, we want to then cultivate and plant and care for the seed and tend to it and all of that so that we can get the apple in the hand, right? It's good to know where it's going, but then you also really have to be like, no, but it's a seed. It's a seed. It's a seed. Because if we go straight to the apple, we will never do the things that need to be done for that seed to thrive.
Mm-hmm. And you talk a lot about truth telling. I mean, in your work and in your podcast, what part does truth telling play in all of this?
Oh God, all of it. It's all just about saying can you really do this? Is this really sane? Are you completely exhausted? Are you taking care of yourself, right? I always say, you cannot play a broken instrument. And for so many of us in our businesses, we are the instruments. Our ideas, our time, our energy are the currency of our business. So if you're burnt out, if you're not sleeping, if you are not able to eat food that is nourishing, you might be able to sustain it in the long run, right? You can drive a car on fumes for a little while, but eventually you're going to have to get gas, or you're going to be pushing that car off the street, which requires so much more energy than just stopping for gas, right?
That's
and
it.
We are so driven that we will drive right over ourselves.
Right, right. You done busted a guitar string months ago, girl.
Yeah, and it sounds bad, and you might be able to fake it for a while, but not forever. And so I think that people are starting to wake up to that, right? And I think that the days of the quick fix solutions and the formulas are not working anymore, right? So I think that we have to shift our focus to a more sustainable, more loving way.
Which all ties into what you were talking about earlier. I mean, if we keep feeding the machine of everything's perfect, everything's filtered, everything's amazing, look at me go, and look at my 8-figure lifestyle, and you can get this too in 4 weeks or 4 hours a week or whatever it is, it's like at some point, everybody says, wait, that's not real. And we're all done with it. Us as practitioners, as influencers, as podcasters, we're also done chasing that because it's not real. And I think people, the audience are like, well, hang on, that is not real. We're seeing it.
I think we are. And I think, I always like to say that the more you feed the beast, the bigger it gets and the more food it requires. So I also think that with myself, like one of the things that I ask myself all the time, because it's easy for my goal to be grow my business, grow my audience, grow. And I think like, well, how big of a beast do I want? Right? How big of a thing do I want? What kind of other things do I want in my life? And then try to use that for, I'm not willing to sacrifice eating dinner with my family to have a 19-figure business, right? To me, not worth it.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's really important to ask yourself those questions and to then be able to if the answer is inconvenient, right? Because everyone's telling us to have a 9-figure business and make millions, and you can do it with just one email and Facebook ads and it'll be fine, blah, 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 right? And if that getting honest about what's not in alignment is the first step.
Yes. And that comes back to what you were saying about getting clear with what your core values are, like what you stand for, what you believe in, where you want to head. That's your compass. And then when you get clear and get back to basics, you simplify down, you get rid of the nonsense. I think making decisions can be very clear at that point because you're like, oh no, this doesn't fit. Oh, why would I chase that?
And if you're willing to tell the truth, you're willing to accept the decision, even if it's highly inconvenient to everything else, right? That's the part where the kind of leaning into that decision-making and finding the thing that's resonant, for me to quit drinking alcohol, that was hugely inconvenient in my life because alcohol played into my life in a lot of ways. And I had to embrace the truth as being more powerful than that convenience.
Yeah. So talk to me about internal versus external. Like, where is it important to focus when you're faced with change in life, in your opinion? Do you focus internally or do you focus externally?
I think both. I think that a lot of, and the answer is going to be different for everyone. So I think that a lot of times the things that we want to do, the success that we want to have happens in the intersection of being and doing, in that Venn diagram of how we show up. I think that so many of us have just become people who do, because there are the steps and there are the things and there are the things to get done, especially in early business, which could take years. There's a bit of a hustle required of get it done. And when you're the only person getting it done, you got to stay up late sometimes and get it done. So I would say for everyone listening, right, take a moment and say, where have you been leaning recently? And then maybe lean back to the other side, because I think the only way that we can find the equilibrium is by then overshooting to the other side. And we eventually, if y'all watching on YouTube, you can see me doing the dance here. You settle in the middle, right? And I know for me, sometimes I'll lean more into the being and be like, I'm just taking walks and meditating and refilling my well and taking naps. And it's like, well, but also you have a podcast due next week. So you should probably record it. So I think that it can be both, and it's up to us to have the discernment to know where to go next.
And that's where that flow of masculine versus feminine exists in all of us. I mean, I also believe that there's a third part of it, masculine, feminine, and then the childlike spirit. The child is play and spontaneity and adventure. The feminine, regardless of what your gender or how you identify as, but feminine in you is about flow and creativity and collaboration. And masculine is about drive and go and do the thing and blah, blah, blah. So it's like utilizing those different areas in decision making and running your business is critically important. You stay in one place too long.
Exactly. And I think that most people are telling us to do it one way or the other, right? Like it's like fail harder or just self-care. And yes, both, right? Both. Yes, and both. Also trust yourself. And figure out, I think one of the best gifts that you can give yourself as an entrepreneur is to get to know yourself so that you are able to unapologetically make decisions. And that won't come right away. And it won't come even once you've gotten a little bit down the path. And it's not going to be without mistakes. But what will happen is every time you're like, I should have said no to that. And I said yes. Or I should have said yes to that and I said no, you'll start to learn what your criteria are and you'll start to weave that in and you'll start to listen to yourself and you'll start to learn when you need to say, no, not yet, follow up in 3 months, or no, not ever, but thank you, right? Like all of this, it comes with time and we don't like to think about time because we want it all to have happened yesterday. Especially for people who are like, no, I got it. If we're doers and we are caretakers and we're go-getters and we're overachievers, that's worked really, really well. And once we stop doing that for the sake of like more sustainable success, everyone in our life is going to be like, what do you mean? But you've been doing this forever. How can you? Which is a whole other thing. I know I'm supposed to simplify it and I'm just bringing all these other elements in.
But I think it's important because these are the swirling thoughts that all of us have. And you talked to me earlier before this about discernment. I mean, understanding and getting quiet so you know what that voice is inside.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that.
I mean, discernment is everything. And it's, people, I teach a year-long class and we spend an entire month on discernment because it's not something that I could give you a 4-part checklist and say, here you go. It really is about getting into communion with yourself and getting quiet. And that getting quiet feels so opposite when there's a to-do list staring you down. I mean, I know I've spent many years working on this for myself and I'm still just feel like I'm scratching the surface. But if you're able to have that discernment, it makes everything else easier, right?
Right, because you're slowing it down, you're getting quiet, you're actually listening to that voice inside you that's saying, hey, I want this, or I don't want that.
And, it's the thing where everybody listening has had the experience of you do something, it doesn't work out well, and then later you look back and you're like, I knew that was going to happen, right? I knew that guy was horrible, or I knew that thing wasn't going to pan out, or I knew that person was going to flake or whatever. And what happens with discernment is that you listen to that intuition right away. And so it saves you so much grief. It saves you so much heartache. It saves you so much extra time and energy where you can step back and your intuition is like, this isn't going to work. This is not going to end well for whatever reason. And you're able to then go to that person and be like, you know what? It's not right. I'm so sorry. I can't.
Yeah. Or not right now.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you talk a lot about taking bold, inspired action towards your dreams. Now we've gotten some real understanding of how you come about to making decisions. So can you just break this down in 4 simple steps? That'd be great.
Yes, of course. You first start by having 47,000 Instagram followers, which is really easy. Right. You can get it overnight.
And then create a funnel.
Exactly. Create a sales funnel and then make sure that you have your, free 6-week course. No.
Right.
Here is what I think about bold inspired action is that it's very, very easy for us to focus on the bold and on the steps that we want to make. And when I think about inspiration, I think about it not from a place of like putting paint on a canvas, but from a place of the root word of inspiration comes from the word that means breath. And when I think about breath, I think about all of us being animals, being divine beings, right? Being divine creatures. And whether you want to talk about God or the universe, or my husband likes to talk about the force. But whatever that is that inspiration comes from that divine spark within us. And so I think that for so many of us, we have looked at bold action as being either what other people have done to get where they are, or what people are telling us to do, or what feels good to everybody else, or what's going to make our family proud at Christmas, right? And we miss the inspiration part. So I think that the action that you take has to be both, right?
Yeah.
It has to be something that's going to get people's attention in whatever way that means. And it has to be something that is really clearly rooted in you, in your soul. And if you can learn how to take action from the place of both, that's when the magic happens.
Yeah. And what I hear you say is get quiet, get clear, and then take action. I mean, that's, and do it for you. Don't do it because of the shoulds in the world, but do it for you.
Do it for you. Do it before you're ready. Do it before you're comfortable. Do it when it's inconvenient. I like to say like we talk a lot about convenience, but if we all just lived off food that they sold at 7-Eleven, we would not be healthy. Right?
Yes, it would be bad.
It might taste good at first, but you're going to feel real gross like 4 hours in. So start to value other things over the convenience, over the quick fix, over the overnight success. Everyone I know who's been an overnight success has had at least 10 years of experience behind them. So this is my 9th year in business, and I'm real excited for next year because I'm like, great, I'll be 10 years in, so I can be an overnight success. And if you're not willing to put in the time on whatever idea that you are trying to drive forward, then I think it's really important to ask yourself, like, is that really the idea that you want to keep going on, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's the truth. So there's a few questions that I like to ask all of my guests. And Tiffany, thank you so much for your time. I just want to take a moment and acknowledge you because I think what you have brought up in the last 40 some odd minutes is incredibly important. And we have to jump ourselves off of the hamster wheel and pause and just say, hang on, is this right or wrong in my life right now where I'm at? So thank you. So one question I like to ask is, what's maybe one book or blog that you are reading right now that is either inspiring you or poking some holes and challenging you in your thought process?
Yeah, so everybody needs to read Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now immediately.
Yes.
That book, I read it recently, and it changed my life in such a deep and profound way that I'm still dealing with. Like I'm still grappling with, and every single day it comes up to me. So that book is world shaking. And for anyone who's tried to read it, I had tried to read it many years ago and just was like, oh, this book is so stupid. He doesn't understand anything. If that was you, maybe give it another shot.
Yeah, just pick it up again, maybe. Give it a go. Yeah, it's an excellent book. So we'll put a link down in the show notes for everybody to be able to check that out. So tell us, who's one person that you know in your circle, colleagues, friends, people you've interviewed in the past that you think we should interview on the Simplifiers podcast, and why?
Can I recommend 2 people? I'm breaking the rules.
Yeah.
So 2 people, and these are 2 of my good friends who both have podcasts of their own. The first is Nicole Antoinette, and she has a podcast called Real Talk Radio. Nicole's been on my show. I've been on her show a couple of times. And she she is so good at just getting to the heart of the matter. And she is really good also at doing those things that are highly inconvenient. She's done a lot of long distance hiking. She's currently in the process of refitting a van because she's going to do like a traveling nomadic van life thing. And she shows up in a really real way where she's like, I'm kind of scared, but this seems like the right thing to do, and kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier. And my other friend that you should definitely talk about, her name is Elise Kripe, and she has a podcast called Elise Gets Crafty. I think she's been on my show 3 different times. She's a founder of a company called Get to Work Book, and is currently, she has a book coming out this spring all about goal setting. And
Amazing.
she is so good at getting things done. She is so good at the follow through. And she's also really good at not complicating it, at keeping things really simple. So I think she would be great for y'all.
Brilliant. Well, I know Nicole. She's brilliant. I can't wait to learn more about Elise. So great recommendations, 100%. So Tiffany, I believe gratitude and simplicity go hand in hand. Tell me, what are you grateful for right now in your life?
I mean, all of it. Just, everything. 2018 was a year for me. We had a lot of life transitions. We moved, we kind of uprooted our entire life, which was a whole thing. And
Yeah.
I just feel like I'm looking out my window right now and seeing the grass outside and the sun is shining. And even just that, right? Just that we can be here doing this, having these conversations that I think are so important, that are so critical. So I'm grateful to be sitting in this chair. Thank you.
Yeah, it's my pleasure as well. So Tiffany, where can people find you online? Where do you hang out the most?
Instagram.
Nowhere. I've quit it all.
My website is tiffanyhan.com, and I'm on Instagram at the Tiffany Han. You can also find my podcast wherever you're listening to this podcast. I am there too. And the podcast is Raise Your Hand, Say Yes, or you can search Tiffany Han, and that's spelled H-A-N, Han like solo is what I like to say.
Perfect. And you guys have a year-long program that comes out for, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I teach a year-long program called Raise Your Hand, Say Yes. And actually the doors are open right now. So we're going to be starting with the spring round in April. And it is a year-long program that really dives deep and teaches women how to become the kind of people who follow through on those things that they say they want to do, be, and say without sacrificing their sanity or their standards. So it really is about looking at a holistic, whole life perspective to help people get things done and follow through. And it's amazing, and I love it.
So click the links in the show notes to be able to find more information about that. My last question for you today is this, Tiffany, and thank you again so much for your time and for your wisdom sharing it. So somebody is out there right now in the world listening to this podcast, getting inspired, has giggled alongside us, and is done with the 8-figure lifestyle in 4 hours or less, right? But she's faced with a major decision in her work. It's a turning point, and she is sitting there on the cusp of making the decision, looking down at the cliff below. What's one thing that you could whisper into her ear right now just to encourage her?
I just want her to breathe and to know, right? I think that the 2 most important breaths that we can take are the one that we take right before we do the hard thing that helps center us and get us into our body. And then the one that we take right after we do the hard thing that lets us know we survived.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. You're welcome.